Hello everyone and welcome to Sinful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the Grey. Today's video is all about players coming from Warhammer 40,000 to Warhammer Age of Sigmar. This video is designed to talk about particular armies that you might play in Warhammer 40,000 and what armies sort of are both similar lore-wise and maybe also potentially game-wise in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. I realise that the two games are vastly different and that's not always the best aspect to look at, so that will be my secondary sort of focus. The main one will be looking at what army do you play in 40k, why do you like that aesthetic, what's cool about its lore to you, and here's an Age of Sigmar army that has something similar about it in the lore. This is by no means a perfect list, and I might be wrong, and feel free to comment if you think some armies might be good for people playing particular armies in 40k as well. But for me, I'm not much of a 40k player myself, hence why I'm using the rules-wise as maybe a secondary aspect, but I do read quite a lot of 40k lore, and I'm quite heavily engrossed in the lore of the universe as well. So, let's get looking. This is some advice for which army to choose for Warhammer 40,000 players coming to Age of Sigmar. First up, we're looking at Space Marines, Adeptus Custodes, and the Adeptus Sororitas, and I guess you can throw in the Sisters of Silence here as well, and maybe the Inquisition, all in one. And the army they are most represented by, and most similar to in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, are the Stormcast Eternals. Now, many of you know Space Marines, and even Custodes and Adeptus Sororitas as these defenders of humanities, these, at times, post-human creatures that are barely even human anymore, and they sacrifice their humanity to defend, well, humanity. Now, the Stormcast Eternals are similar in a way. They have very similar design aesthetics to Space Marines and Custodes in the large plates of armor and all that sort of stuff. They're big knightly creatures as well, and they are, I guess, to an extent, post-human as well. They're heroic spirits absorbed by the God King Sigmar upon their deathbeds and transformed under the hammers of his smiths into these lightning-fueled god aspect warriors, almost demigods, I guess, very similar to the Space Marines. The main difference is that they don't actually remember the humanity at all, or in some cases they do, but they have very minute memories of it, or they can remember a face but can't remember who it belongs to, what that person was to them, or they can remember they had a wife, they had a child, but they can't remember what they look like. And the Stormcast, much like the Space Marines, they give up their humanity to protect the humanity that they once were before. Stormcast aren't all good though, and much like the Space Marines, however, the Space Marines, I guess, have Chaos as well. Stormcast do not have Chaos at Stormcast, but rather they have storm hosts that represent maybe some of the nastier sides of some of the Space Marines and Adeptus Sororitas and all that. They have particular storm hosts that are very particular with chaos, corruption, and taint, and deal with that in very extreme manners. And the reason why I've put Adeptus Sororitas here is because there isn't, while we have all-female armies in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, I don't think that's what the Adeptus Sororitas are representing. They're not representing an all-female army, they're an army of pious saints-like characters, and that is best represented in some of the storm hosts. And also to the fact where with storm hosts, we have particular ones that are very faithful and devoted to Sigmar. We have storm hosts that have that, I guess, god-worshipping aspect to them. And there are also a ton of female sculpts. Even some of the named characters are female sculpts in the Stormcast Eternals army. Next up we have Adeptus Mechanicus, and the army most like them in Warhammer Age of Sigmar is the Kharadron Overlords. So the Adeptus Mechanicus is a bunch of machine-worshipping, cybernetically altered humans that are on the side of the Imperium for the most part. Yes, there are Dark Mechanicum out there. However, the army they're most like, I guess, in Warhammer Age of Sigmar is the Kharadron Overlords, and I pretty much give this reference mainly from the fact the Kharadron Overlords are the most technologically advanced race in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. What they bring to the table is this steampunk shoot-off called Aetherpunk, or what's been dubbed as Aetherpunk, where they use this lighter-than-air gold that's totally not magic to power up their weapons. The Kharadron Overlords have a wide range of all manner different guns. They even have airships, which is really awesome. And they have some really cool and interesting units alongside that as well. For me, they just scream out to be the army that I would get an Adeptus Mechanicus player into, just from the simple similarities in how they're all this about taking technology. The Kharadron also have this particular code where they have to follow by it, but they're not quite as bound, or at least some of them aren't quite as bound by the code as others. Much like we have some Mechanicus who are all like, no, you can't change the machine spirits, it's like this. Or like this particular weapon works like this and it always has worked like this and it always will. You've got Kharadron that are like that, but you've also got Kharadron that are very innovative and innovative and I guess inventive is the word I was looking for. Bleh. But yeah, for Adeptus Mechanicus, I would strongly suggest Kharadron Overlords. The next one is an easy one. Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, the generic human fighting in a world full of monsters and aliens. Well, their obvious replacement, and I guess the army to obviously jump into if that's what you like, being up against the wall with just your basic little gun against hordes of monsters, aliens, and all sorts of other evil things the galaxy throws at you, then Cities of Sigmar is certainly the army for you. While Cities of Sigmar, I guess, has some more exotic things that it contains generic elves, dwarves, and humans called Dwarden for dwarves though there. Cities at Sigmar really is just that same sort of feel to an army. These are your generic populace. These are the people you can most relate to, and this army gives you the feel of that against all odds, even the smallest thing can prevail. For me, this is personally my favourite army and a big reason why I like Imperial Guard in Warhammer 40,000. I think the ties here of just being that generic dude fighting against the world. And much like Imperial Guard on how you have all the specialist legions like Vostroyans, the Valhallans, and the Mordians, and all of those cool specialist regiments and stuff, you have different free cities you can pick from that each have their own different unique aesthetics that you can apply to them, and you can even start making your own as well with some fantastic stuff you'll find on Warhammer Community. I posted a video just about that as well. This one's pretty easy and pretty simple for me. Imperial Knights are an army with these gigantic, mass-destroying mega machines created by the Adeptus Mechanicus and a whole bunch of other people around them, and the I guess straight up representation of them in Warhammer Age of Sigmar is the Sons of Behemat, this army of gigantic gargants bigger than you could ever possibly imagine. For me, this is just a straight swap. You like playing big armies, then well, Knights to Sons of Behemat just makes sense to me. However, I will stress that maybe Imperial Knights you just like playing with lots of big things, and there are a lot of armies in Warhammer Age of Sigmar that can allow you to play with all monster armies, be that say Ogre Moor Tribes, Flesh Eater Courts, or even some others can be really monster heavy like Cities of Sigmar even as well. There's definitely a lot to consider if that's your sort of thing and why you're playing Imperial Knights, but for me, Sons of Behemat are the monster army that is always a monster army, so they're the straight up replacement, or I guess transition army. So the next thing up is Chaos Daemons, Chaos Space Marines, and all the associated sub-factions or full armies in their own right, like Thousand Sons and Death Guard, etc. Now, for me, these straight up swap to very different sort of factions in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and I think before we get into that, we need to explain how the factions work in the two particular games. Chaos Daemons in Warhammer 40,000 is a singular army consisting of all the different types of them in one force, while in Age of Sigmar, all of them are split up into different forces, each representative of their gods. So in 40k, while you have just Chaos Space Marines and Chaos Daemons, you have just god-specific armies like the Hedonites of Slaanesh, Disciples of Tzeentch, Maggotkin of Nurgle, Blades of Khorne, and Slaves to Darkness, which is your generic sort of undivided Chaos army, but can also have marks as well. And so these armies, I guess, directly translate into those forces. There's also another mention here, if you're a particular fan of Zangor, then you might want to check out the Beasts of Chaos as well, which are bestial goatmen. But for the most part, I think Chaos just swap straight over into Chaos. It's just a bit different in how your army runs. If there's a particular type of Chaos god that you like to worship, with say your Emperor's Children and like running those Slaanesh Marines, maybe you go into Hedonites of Slaanesh, or rather if you're the World Eaters and you like all your Khorne stuff, you might go into say the Blades of Khorne. It's definitely worth checking out, and maybe if you're a Black Legion fan, I guess the perfect example of what to go into for you might be looking at Archaon, who is a sort of, I guess, Age of Sigmar's Abaddon in a way, although much higher standing than Abaddon is. He's sort of more like Horus almost, if Horus had actually succeeded, but more on that in a different lore video. But yeah, Chaos, I would just straight up go into the other Chaos faction and start looking around at things that look very similar. And if you've got a Demon army already, well, you've already got an army to go and play, as most of them are pretty decent playable on the table. Next, we're starting to get into the Xenos factions now, and we're going to talk about Craftworld Eldar, and who I think are the direct, I guess, symbiotic race in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and that is the Lumineth Realm Lords. If you liked Craftworld Eldar, generally, I found when I started playing 40k, I got into Craftworld Eldar myself as well, and that was mostly because I was an elf fan. I found, liked elves in fantasy games, went over to Warhammer 40k and got into elves in space. I know that's not exactly what Eldar are, but let's face it, that's the general appeal of them to a lot of people. So going into Craftworld to Eldar and now coming back, Lumineth Realm Lords are a fantastic look. They're effectively our brand new high elves in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and they actually have some interesting things that I guess feel a lot like Eldar of the Craftworlds in a lot of ways. So the Craftworld Eldar are probably most renowned, I guess, for two things. They have Wraith constructs. Now that's not the thing I'm going to talk about mostly here, that's actually quite similar, but the other thing is the aspect temples for the aspect warriors. Now, we all know about them from Warhammer 40k, but the Lumineth Realm Lords actually have these aspects of Haish that they pray to, and they're effectively these 4 different temples that give them these temple warriors. So very similar sort of thing to how Eldar work in Warhammer 40k, how you have these different aspects representing these different things. And the Lumineth have a bunch of whole weird and wacky things they do, and they have their generic battle line troops, like you have Guardians and all the stuff that the Guardians pilot, etc. in Eldar, but you also have these specialist troops that can do a whole range of different things. Some of them are mounted, some of them not, some of them are assault troops, and we haven't actually seen them all yet for Lumineth Realm Lords, but the ones we have seen are awesome, and they're definitely, I think, a great way to get into Age of Sigmar if you're coming as a Craftworld Eldar player. They also give you a really rewarding playstyle for playing with all these different pieces that require you to know a lot about your army as well, which I find really fun. Next up, we're going to talk about Drukhari, so the Dark Eldar. And the armies I think they most go into are going to be 2 separate things. So Drukhari generally are made up of 2 very different parts, I find. You've got the generic Kabalites, the Archons and all their normal warriors, and then you've got the Witch Covens within the Drukhari. You've also got the Homunculus Covens and all that sort of stuff, and the weird monsters, and I feel that can sort of fit into either way, because both these armies I'm about to mention have these weird looking monsters in very different aspects. But for me, Daughters of Khaine are who you go to if you're playing Witch Covens in Warhammer 40,000. They're essentially the same idea of this coven of bloodthirsty murder elves that worship a god of murder. I mean, they worship Khaine, so it's a pretty straight up swap for me, and they've got some fantastic miniatures and they play very, very similar. On the other hand, you've got Idoenth Deepkin, who I think represent Drukhari really well, who are these raiders that go out collecting souls to prolong their own life. And the Idoenth Deepkin do the same for a very different reason, though. They're not trying to hide away from Slaanesh. They're actually trying to save their own souls, as 90% of their young are born without a proper functioning soul, so they have to go steal other people's souls to keep their population alive. For me, these are just straight up swaps and some great armies. It only makes sense that, well, the Dark Eldar, who are the Dark Space Elves, go straight into the Dark Elves in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Next up, and I feel this one is probably one of the ones I struggle to find a direct replacement for the most, I guess lore-wise, but I feel this is probably the closest thing I can get to, so I'd be interested to hear some other people's thoughts on this suggestion. But for me, Harlequins go into Sylvaneth. I think this is sort of the army that plays the way of just jumping around the table, has lots of infiltration, and has these cool centerpiece models. And Sylvaneth do much the same, where they're jumping around the table. They're these mysterious folk, lore-wise as well, that sort of hide out, protecting hidden glades, and Harlequins obviously protect the Black Library. Now, the main reason I've drawn this sort of connection here is we're starting to see some models come out called Kurnothi that have a lot of the old Warhammer 8 fantasy vibes from the Wood Elves of the War Dancers. These, for me, are very similar to Harlequins, and Harlequins effectively are Warhammer 40,000 War Dancers in my mind, and I think this is where the true connection lies. This one is a little bit of a stretch, and Harlequins, I think you're just going to have to go with what Eldar generally fit into in this, but this is a perfect replacement. Probably a side note as well, if you're into the sort of Exodite Eldar sort of feeling, this is definitely the army for you. Next up, we're looking at the Necrons, these immortal-ish warriors that were betrayed by the people they thought would save them from the very gods they sought to take down, are most directly replaced by an army made by a god. So the Necrons effectively are our army of Terminator death robots in Warhammer 40k, and the Ossiarch Bonereapers I feel are the most direct replacement. Rather than being, I guess, mindless undead, the Ossiarch Bonereapers are actually bone constructs specifically crafted by the god of death Nagash himself for tasks that they need to do. So you'll find some of them have all these different sort of bits, and they don't look exactly like skeletons. That's because, well, they're not actually skeletons. They've been crafted in this perfect sort of manner to do these battlefield roles. That's why you have these massive sort of four-armed monsters alongside just the gigantic monsters that you have as well, and foot troops and all besides. Very much like how all the Necrons have different functions, and they all are Necrons all the same, despite how some may appear much larger than others. I feel this is a fantastic direct replacement for an army, and you also get that hard immovable wall of undead legion warriors fighting for you that you get a feel in Warhammer 40k as well, playing Necrons. Well, this one is easy. Orks, go to Orruks. This is pretty darn simple. If you like big green skin monsters smashing and bashing their way across the mortal realms, then you go into Orruks in Warhammer Age of Sigmar that are smashing and bashing their way across the mortal realms of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. This is just a straight up swap. Both armies play very similarly. They want to get into combat, they want to fight, they want to beat the opponent up, and they're both pretty darn good at it. Orruk Warclans probably has a few more builds where it can be a bit more elite than what I hear Orks play like nowadays in Warhammer 40k, but you can definitely pretty much replicate any sort of Ork army you feel like doing in Warhammer 40,000 in Warhammer Age of Sigmar pretty easy by just swapping straight over to Orruk Warclans. A little bit of a side note too, if you're a big fan of Gretchen or Grotz, then you can definitely just move over and play with Gloomspite Gits, who are the Goblin faction in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Next up, we're looking at the Tau Empire. This race of aliens is highly technologically advanced and also features a ton of different mercantile units in its arms. Has a whole bunch of different races pulled together, highly advanced. For me, this screams two particular armies in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and we'll get to how you maybe can combine them into a single army after. But first of all, I recommend Cities of Sigmar. This is because, once again, it's very similar to how the Tau Empire like to bring all the different parts of the Vespid, the Kroot, and Tau all together, along with other races. I've seen plenty of people make their own special races for Tau along the years, but for me, Cities of Sigmar does that sort of aspect of Tau very well. On the other hand, Tau are highly technologically advanced, and the Kharadron Overlords are the most technologically advanced race in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, as we've already stated in this video. So for me, there's that part of it as well, that Tau players may like the Kharadron Overlords army. It's also the fact that Tau is a very heavy shooting army, and that Kharadrons are a very heavy shooting army as well. Though Cities of Sigmar can be a very heavy shooting army in its own right as well, though very different. Much more similar to, say, the Lines of Fire Warriors than the mech sort of build that I guess Kharadron are probably more close to. However, there is a particular sub-faction in the Cities of Sigmar Battle Tome, which is our version of Codexes for Warhammer Age of Sigmar, called Tempest Eye. Tempest Eye allows you to play a Cities of Sigmar unit, but take some Kharadron Overlords units within that army. So this can be a great way potentially to maybe get the best out of both worlds, and maybe it's worth having a look down that particular avenue as well. And lastly, we have the Tyranids, and we'll also include Genestealer cults in this. So Tyranids are this race of ever-hungry monsters that roam across the galaxy, devouring entire planets, and have a whole host of maniacal contraptions and beasts in their ranks. For me, their direct replacement is actually the Skaven. Now, this comes down to a very strong lore aesthetic that the Tyranids' whole thing is they just want to eat everything, and the Skaven, well, they want utter world domination. The Skaven also have a wide variety of different sort of beasts and monsters and rats and contraptions all throughout their army, and I feel a Tyranid player will really get a great joy from forming hordes of Tyranids to playing hordes of Skaven. Alongside your Tyranid hordes, you generally get to play with big things like Carnifexes and Tyrannifexes and all that sort of stuff, and in Skaven you get all these weird and wondrous monsters like Rat Ogres, Hellpit Abominations and Storm Fiends and more besides. I feel these two are a great comparison to each other and really give you an aesthetic and playstyle very similar to each other. So if you're jumping from Warhammer 40,000 to come play Age of Sigmar, or coming just to play Warhammer Age of Sigmar and still play 40k, you can definitely have a look at Skaven, I think. Well, thanks for watching. I hope this video has been insightful for anyone coming from Warhammer 40,000 to play Warhammer Age of Sigmar, and maybe giving you an idea of where to look for an army to play in this game. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, comment on the video, and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our fine community, you can do so by following the link down to our Discord server in the comments below. Also, while you're on YouTube, if you'd like to check out more Warhammer Age of Sigmar content, go check out my featured channel section where there's a bunch of other fantastic Warhammer Age of Sigmar content creators. Lastly, we'd like to give a shout out to everyone who supports the channel via Patreon, YouTube members or Ko-fi, or in other means financially. Thank you to James, AJC, JC, Christian Weir, Philip Ward, Soren, Kenny Lyle, Outer and Shot First, Chaos Spawn, and James Crowder. Thank you all so much for your support, and if you'd like to help support the channel, you can do so by following one of the links down in the video's description to go help support. Thank you all for watching once again. Stay safe, stay well, everyone, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.